read out what I have to say. I find it easier to do that. I'm very concerned about the council plans for the Pykokuriki seawall. About 3 to 4 years ago, the Pykokuriki community was promised a seawall. A plan was put forward, which had been drawn up by Kāpiti, very well-known architects. This plan was approved by both the council and the community, and it would go ahead in 3 to 4 years, giving the council time to raise the money. Many of us felt that we could not trust the council to keep their word on this, but they did say that, absolutely assured us, and that Sean Mallon assured us, that it would go ahead as planned. Now, the council has reneged on that plan, which is quite sad, and are now offering a high, straight up and down wooden wall. The impact on this high wall of a big storm, with the waves crashing against it, would gouge out the sand, and we would be left with a sandless beach. We saw this happen with the horrendous rock wall that was installed at the southern end of Pykokuriki Beach. Now, I've given you a photo, and this was taken a few years back when we had the first sort of discussions on this thing as to what happened. Now, where the rocks end, where you see the last of the rocks, that is about the end of the rocks, that just past the sand track, and you can see what's happened. The beach was wide all the way down until it reached that wall, and you can see that the sea, where the beach up the northern end, completely free, and it was much wider than what it's shown here. We sort of came in and took it quite close in, and you can see the sea is absolutely crashing against that wall, whereas the rest of the beach is fine, and we did lose that part of the beach. So I'll just go on here. We saw this happen with the horrendous rock wall that was installed at the end of Pykokuriki Beach. The southern end pretty much disappeared, and more often than not, the massive rocks kept falling off the wall, and the rocks took up more of the beach than intended. I would think that the council would not want to make another terrible mistake with its second attempt at the Pykokuriki wall. Our beach is our biggest asset. Putting up a wall that lasts only 25 years is really sheer madness. This is just passing the buck on to the next generation to replace the wall in 25 years, and at what huge cost would it be then? Not good financial practice. You also state that a concrete wall would last 50 years. As far as I know, the concrete wall on Centennial Drive has lasted about 90 years and still standing. Concrete sounds a far better financial proposition than the wood. What we need is a stepped concrete wall which would diffuse the waves and reduce the impact on the sand. We need seating and planting to beautify the beach. Now, I don't know who were the experts that the council was consulted on this wall as to how it would affect the beach. Now, I'd say it is normal to get about 3 quotes for every project, and I'm just asking, how many quotes did the council get for the stepped concrete wall plan? Has anyone thought about the lack of building timber? There would be a mountain of timber for the seawall, and there is such a lack of it at the moment, and prices will go up and up on the timber if we continue to have the shortages. Now, would the council consider a stepped concrete wall if a quote comes in around the cost of the wooden wall, as you have it at the moment? It must also be considered, I was just saying, I've already said that, the price of the timber would go up because of the scarcity. That's all I have to say.
Questions? Councillor Holborough.
Hi Rhonda, thanks for coming in, and really valuable to have this feedback and to come in with a productive suggestion too. It's a shame that Holly's not here today, but I'm sure she's had a good look at your written submission. So were you involved in the previous consultation, and was there a stepped concrete option I'm just trying to remember when Becca came in and was doing all that
Yes,
consultation.
they had that stepped option with all the plantings and the seating, and it was a beautiful option. Yeah,
So
but
it's not the same as the $27 million
no,
design group one.
I
It's
don't
a different
think so.
one.
Well, is that right, John? You would know that. Is it the same as what they've had quoted for the 27 million?
There was never a serious look at the stepped concrete option at all. All that was put forward and consented was the very expensive what has ended up being the $27 million option that we have before us in the handout.
Yeah, just for the purpose of the live streaming, the response is that the stepped option wasn't ever costed. So just before I finish, just a heads up that the like-for-like replacement would be like-for-like. So it wouldn't presumably be higher than it would go deeper, but wouldn't be higher than what's there at present. And also any further, and wouldn't require resource consent. And there's also an existing resource consent for the other option, which is why those two options are the ones that are part of the reason those two options are identified in the long-term plan.
Yes.
But thanks for coming in today for your input. It's very, very valuable. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora, Rhonda. My question is just around, you talk about not passing the buck or not wanting to pass the buck onto future generations. I'm just wondering, firstly, what kind of kōrero you've had with younger people, or if you've heard from that kind of younger generation about their thoughts on this, but also further to that, what your thoughts are on the managed retreat conversation and the need to actually ensure that that we're looking at an even further long-term vision for our coastline than even 50 years.
Well, no, I haven't talked to a lot of young people about it, but I think that you talk of a managed retreat. I think that if we did the right wall, we might not need a managed retreat for Pykokuriki. If the right wall was done and our road was protected, we probably would not need it. If we have a wooden wall that's going to last 25 years, we would be looking at managed retreat. Whereas I think if we did the right thing and had the right wall and the right protection, I mean, you look at places like, England has got beaches all around their country that have been protected in quite amazing ways, lots of different ways, but they have protected, and things have lasted like hundreds of years. They're holding back the sea because they have done something that has worked. And I think that's what we need, is something that will work. The wooden seawall won't. If it's a 25-year thing, it will collapse, and you then might be looking at managed retreat, which would be a terrible shame. It would sort of wreck Pykokuriki, wouldn't it, really? So, yeah.
Right, there are no other questions, Rhonda, so thank you for coming early and being able to take advantage of a slot that's been there just for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Is James Lee here by any chance?
Yes.
You ready to go?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, shall I just start when I'm ready?
Yep, start when you're ready.
Okay then. I've got 3 brief points to make. As far as managed retreat goes, this one, and climate control, rising sea levels, etc. Yeah, I feel that we need a seawall completely round Waikanae estuary, right up to the Waikanae River in that side, where the dunes are less deep to the sea. We need some more defence. It's a valuable community. We shouldn't just think of one away and like one for the hills or whatever, managed retreat, whatever you want to call it. To me, there's lots of places in the world which have dealt with this. Look at the Netherlands, for example. Look at Canvey Island in England. And I think I'm not a soil engineer, but I know there is ways that this could be dealt with. It's not necessarily looking at the cost all as one go, like, oh yeah, it's going to cost so many hundreds of millions. It's an ongoing thing, even if it is just 3 meters a month or something. It's just a progression thing. It isn't immediately on us, but it is looming. So I feel that that's one of the things that needs to be looked at a little bit more carefully. I do feel, you know, it's something we should value. We should value the community. We shouldn't just be all ready to run away from it. All right, second point, weights increase. I think in view of Jacinda Ardern, even though her budget isn't actually out now, but it looks like she's going to go for a conservative approach. I think this council shouldn't be continually hiking up the weights. It's already a lot of people are struggling financially, and I think it's like writing your own paycheck. There's no one to actually hold you to book. So I feel that is just not right at this time, especially after the last few years has been the maximum you can go for every year. So, and again, we've done it again this year. It's just, I don't feel that that's right. And then the third point would be Kāpiti Gateway down at Brown Beach. I feel that it's going to block out the vision. It's on the wrong side. It's a contrary argument the way I see it, because 1 minute you're arguing that your rise and sea levels managed retreat, and then you're going to build a £1 million building there, which doesn't actually help the community. It might help, like, attract tourism, maybe, but the actual community doesn't give us any longevity with the community. So I feel that should be reconsidered. That money could be better spent on social housing, on Param Hospital, for example, as many other things. Yeah, I don't necessarily, you know. So is that my little beep? All right then. Okay.
Hold on. Don't run away.
So.
Questions? Councillor Randall.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, James. Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
Okay. The question relates to a thing about a concrete cedar fence wall around North Beach.
Yeah.
Is this on the Paraparaumu side or the Waikanai side?
On the Paraparaumu side. Yeah, because I feel that the elevation, there's already, if you look at down by Foursquare and the front beach at Waikanai, and right along there's a much more mound of dunes. It's almost like a sea dike, the natural sort of environmental geology of the place. But whereas you look at North Beach, it's more or less level. There's very little elevation with the actual community. The argument of looking at Pykokuriki seawall, admittedly it might need some refurbishment and some looking at, but it has a lot more elevation than Param North Beach. So I don't know why you're looking at something which has already naturally more elevation than what Param North Beach has. North Beach has got a considerable growing community. It's a very popular place. The property's gone through the sky, and it's something that's not being addressed. It really does need. It needs right around the estuary. I understand the estuary's got these ecological points of view about it, but it doesn't necessarily have to encroach completely upon it. It could be just 3-4 meters. It could just be like a boardwalk of, and you could do. I'm not a soil engineer. I'm not a civil engineer, but I know that I've seen it happen. You could build concrete walls with a loose gravel, stone, non-dissolvable aggregate in the middle, which would completely be topped up and would settle, much like the Tower of London. If you could do this all the way around, and that would protect us forever, you know, for the foreseeable future. I do really strongly feel that we've got the focus on the wrong area. Really, Param North Beach is much more, if there's going to be a flood, it's going to be there. That's the lowest part to the sea, and that's the most immediate threat, and that's what we should be addressing.
Okay, next question, Councillor Hanford.
Kia ora, James. Thanks
Hi.
for mentioning more wind turbines and renewables in your submission here. And I note that you also mentioned the fact that you haven't seen or heard anything about the draft strategic framework for action on the climate emergency. So I'm just wondering if you were actually aware that in the consultation document there were draft strategic framework principles.
Yes.
So I'd refer you back to the consultation document to just check over those. But we look forward
managed retreat, which really was the option there. And I feel that all the good community of North Beach and the whole of Paraparaumu, we all pay our wage, we're all good little citizens, and we look at you, we look at the council to do these heavy engineering projects and that sort of thing. And rather than I'm not going to. It seems to me that the council just refused to do any financial help whatsoever, any projects. They're more interested in other things. It's just say, without getting overly critical, but it doesn't seem that they're protecting the community. It just feels like, yeah, there's the Akatara, there's one there and sit on top of the hill. There's no services up there, there's nothing there. It's going to be massive to develop that and make that some sort of habitat. Whereas, as I say, you could already put a seawall like they have in other communities. Just look at the Netherlands. They've got massive, like 50% nearly of their land is actually reclaimed from the sea. And rising sea levels still apply there just as much as they do here. We haven't actually had any floods, but we're told that it is imminent and it is a real risk. So it's something we should prepare for. Plus, we've also got the tsunami threat as well, which is another issue to be addressed. But again, the seawall would cover both of these, or would help with it, depending on the height of the tsunami and other variables. Okay, thank you.
Right. Doesn't seem to be any other questions. Thank you, James, and thank you for stepping up earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grey Power. Trevor, you ready?
Excuse me.
Doesn't end. We were disappointed in the document securing our future for a variety of reasons. Small print, hard to see colour, and we could have had less pictures, bigger print and more information. The document relies upon access to KCDC website for pertinent information and an ability to read graphs. A recent report by the Bank of New Zealand that was referred to by MSD recently indicates that 33% of the 60 to 69-year-olds and 50% of the 70 to 79-year-olds and 79% of those over the age are not IT savvy. So if they couldn't see the information in front of them, they wouldn't get it. The significant figures are when 28, and the significance of these figures is that 28% of the population is over the age of 65. And that's why we believe there's such a low number of submissions. I remember one year there were 177. Key points for us are the threefold increase in capital expenditure. That's hidden in small print in one of the pages, and the rates increase in 2 and 3 years of 8.3 and 8.6% are disclosed in a graph, which a lot of people think is a foreign language. It's noticeable that only 13 submissions answered the question about rates, and only one individual and 3 organisations commented on the rate increases in years 2 and 3. Ratepayers, in any case, have told us it doesn't matter what they say, the council will do what it wants anyway. That's probably why only 12 tenants plus 2 Craig Power committee members turned up to the meetings to announce the changes in the council housing rentals. We acknowledge the change in the private-public split, but the increase in rentals is not disclosed, so general ratepayers were unaware of the proposed rental changes. Is the setting of only 2 rates for council housing fair to all tenants? understand that this results in at least a 50% increase in rents on some properties. It's obvious from the submissions that only the tenants were aware of the effect of this proposal because council officers provided them with papers and brochures telling them that they might get assistance from WINS, and that's not entirely sure. We're not entirely sure about that either. But Grey Power's overlying issue is the rate increases. Only 13 people commented on increase, as I said, and only 3 recognised the year 2 and 3 increases. The Burl affordability tables, which were on a website earlier, I couldn't find them last night, said there was a group of low-income families where the rates were over 20% of the income. I just wonder what the council can do about that. We wonder if the council is trying to beat the proposed reforms announced by the minister by rushing into its current program. So the threefold increase in projects is not only pushing up the rates, it's decreasing the intergenerational equity for the current demographic, LD demographic, which we believe pays 40% of the council rates income. And my experience with the Ocean Road project verifies the auditor's concern about supplies and labour availability. Materials are hard to come by and are increasing in price. Grey Power requests that the council reviews the proposed works program with the objective of reducing the rates increase. Thank you.
Open for questions. Councillor Coates.
Trevor, thanks for coming in this morning. Could I just clarify the number of submissions? How many submissions are you aware that we've received on the long-term plan?
About 70.
So just to clarify that, we've received just under 800 submissions. I know that because I'm still trying to read them. Like every other councillor around the table.
Well, they're not available to the public.
Because we're still processing them given the amount of volume that come in. So I was up at 6 a.m. this morning, still reading through ones for Wednesday as well. So we certainly received a good number of submissions, more than I can recall in previous LTPs. However, the question around rates, so Grey Power have continually year on year opposed rate increases, at least in the time that I've been around the table. 50 million of our debt is from unfunded depreciation. And so previous councils kicking the can down the road to artificially keep rates lower. Is that what you're suggesting that we continue to do? Is to try and keep rates up? 6.2% of our proposed increase is unfunded depreciation, closing the depreciation gap and inflation before we even do anything.
Yeah, I understand that, but what you don't say in the documents is how that's going to affect operating expenditure in future years. Because depreciation will be a significant part of the bill.
I guess my question to you is, do you think that the council should continually try to artificially keep rates lower by not funding?
No, I don't believe that. Perhaps you could slow the rate of recovery, but you do need to recover the depreciation. Okay. And depreciation, of course, just gives you the cash to do current works. You don't stick it away in a pocket anywhere.
Councillor Holbrook.
Hi Trevor, thank you very much for your submission today and for your ongoing work advocating on behalf of the older community in Kāpiti. I'm just wanting to know, what engagement did you have with your members around the submission to make sure that it represents the views of all the members? I'm particularly thinking about support for keeping the airport open. What kind of numbers do you have who want to keep it open as opposed to housing?
We did that with our committee.
Okay.
And that's why we didn't recommend doing nothing with the airport.
Right. Okay. So, erred towards the status quo on the question. Thank you very much. That's all I have. Thanks a lot, Trevor.
Councillor McCann.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Trevor. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the submission and for your support for housing. And I've asked this question before today, but I'd like to ask it again of you. Do you see that the council should be skewing the housing work that we hope to do towards senior housing or for families, or do you think we should be doing both?
Interested in social housing, so that's the whole gambit.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Oh, no, actually my question's just been answered. But thank you very much, Trevor.
Thank you.
Councillor Buswell.
Thanks, Trevor, for coming in, as usual. I was just interested in a comment that you made. I might have misheard it, but you said that 28%, which is the amount of population over the age of 60 or 65, pay 40% of the rates?
Yeah, that when by the time you take away all those people, all those children and young people who live with their parents, then that changes the balance. That indicates that the older group pay more than their share.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Doesn't seem to be any other questions. Trevor,
Okay.
thank you for your submission. Otaki College. Tēnā koe.
Kia te pai. Tēnā tātou, nei rā te mihi kia koutou, nā kaimahi o te kaunihera. I'm speaking today on not only behalf of Otaki College, but also Kahui Tokotoko Otaki, the Otaki education community of learning, and by default the Otaki community. We wish to address the proposal in the LTP around the placement of an all-weather sports facility at Paraparaumu College and question how do these proposals get into the LTP without any consultation with the wider sector of the community, including the education community. What we perceive as a lack of consultation helps perpetuate the feeling that Otaki is not considered in the wider thinking of this council. The Otaki community want you to apply an equity lens on what facilities are required and where they are to be placed and the impact this has on our whānau as ratepayers. There are 5 secondary schools on the Kāpiti coast, but there seems to be a continued appetite to serve only 2 of them. This council has poured over $2 million into Kāpiti College with further requests for support in this LTP and over $1.4 million in the gym facility alone at Paraparaumu College, with another 8 years to go on that agreement and further funding to go into a roof replacement. Ask us if Otaki youth have received any benefits from these investments, and the answer is little to no benefit at all. A decision to fund this proposed all-weather sports facility is a decision to continue to sideline Otaki youth and their growing needs. These future investments into facilities based on these 2 colleges provide no benefit at all for our youth or young people or the residents for 3 critical reasons. Poor public transport infrastructure to get to Paraparaumu, the cost of travel via private vehicle to get to them, and the stress that then places on whānau, and the actual cost to access these facilities for groups after college hours. Your own statistics clearly point out that Otaki is the poorest ward in the Kāpiti coast with the highest level of social degradation factors, and yet you are asking this sector of the community to again support rate increases for these types of facilities that we gain nothing from. Our rates support services such as NGOs, free ambulance, Zeal Youth, and yet we have little access to them due to the factors outlined above and outdated boundaries for such things as health, which continue to disadvantage our community. Otaki College struggled to gain funding for our community gym. We were incredibly grateful to KCDC for finally receiving $300,000 to be placed into our facility over 6 years, and we are now able to continue to run a true community hub which applies a koha system for use of the gym, so no group in our community is ever disadvantaged by cost. This maximises the use of our gym facility, which is now stretched to capacity. Would this model be considered for facilities that continue to be based in Paraparaumu for Otaki organisations to offset the costs of access? We also question why this facility is required now when KCDC already have a state-of-the-art all-weather sports facility in the district, that being Ngā Purapura in Otaki. There is nothing stopping Kāpiti Coast residents using this facility beyond their own desire not to travel to Otaki, when as a wider community they're better placed to do so. We also question the development of this facility now when the council have acquired Otarawa Park for this very purpose in developing a district-wide sports hub. While this might be difficult to access again for Otaki residents, it's less distance to travel than south, and it would be a facility that could be used by the community all day long and not just after 3:30 when a college students are no longer scheduled for it. Why spend money on a facility now when it could be better utilised for later? In light of the purchase of Otarawa Park, it was our understanding it was future focused to manage a growing population. Demographics would show that that future is to the north. And so it is for that reason that if you are still wanting to build such a facility, why isn't it being looked at further north to give that spread of facilities and openings for all of our community? I would implore you to stop disadvantaging Otaki residents and start looking at addressing our needs that are clearly articulated in your statistics that you have in the Kāpiti Coast District. We have the opportunity to do something special in Otaki with a $9 million designated for the town development that could put a complex in place that could support our youth and those in need in our community. Rather than invest money in an all-weather facility, why not use that money to invest in people and services to start addressing the needs of our Otaki community? Help us to continue to build our local capacity to meet these needs through funding organisations like Te Puna Oranga, Ngā Hapua Otaki, or even Zeal to make a difference and strengthen this community. In closing, Otaki for a long time has been left out of conversations and it needs to stop. As a collective of councillors, you have the power to apply a lens on communities that is equitable and future focused and start addressing the real needs that are out there in communities such as ours, rather than satisfying the desires of those whose voice seems louder and who just want more. Tēnā tātou katoa.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Kapai. Andy, awesome submission. Thank you very much. Look, I just want to get some clarification of you over that past funding for your college gym.
Yes.
So 300k over 6 years.
Yes.
That was 3 years ago.
Yep.
So it's halfway through.
Yes.
And was that a 300k a year?
No.
Or what? No. Can you
It was 300,000 to be spread out over 6 years.
Yeah.
At $50,000 a year to allow us to continue to run our gymnasium as a community hub.
And it has 3 years to run.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really important that we know that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Kia ora, Andy and gentlemen. Thanks for coming down here today. In the interest of transparency, we've obviously, as your ward councillor,
yes,
discussed your concerns with me. One of them was around, obviously, the funding and the one of the examples used was Te Raukura. And from your perspective, to be fair, it wasn't a criticism of the facility, great facility, great concept,
yep.
But the lack of, I guess, use from Otaki students. In turn, when Mr. Kane was in here yesterday, I challenged him around what was the use from those within Otaki, given that, you know, the district use was part of the pitch when that facility was mooted. His response was that it wasn't due to lack of availability. So I'm interested in your feedback around what's the barriers to Otaki youth using that facility when we are then considering other venues like the indoor sports centre potentially at Paraparaumu College, and then I have a follow-up.
Well, I think that then the first point is one which I've made really clear, and that is that our youth really struggle to get to Paraparaumu to access any of those services. Secondly, even when we are trying to access those services, often that means that whānau have to bring our kids down here, and that's a stress on whānau. The next part of that is that our kids feel quite disconnected from Paraparaumu. We don't actually have a major cultural connection with this particular area, and so our kids do feel disconnect and feel, actually, if you ask them and talk to them, like second-rate citizens. Everything is here in their eyes, and they are always on the sideline. And they struggle. And they struggle for social services, they struggle for mental health services, They battle with the boundaries where we have to send our kids north with no public transport, and then there's the expectation that they come down here for everything else. And I don't believe that's good enough. And if you look at those statistics, which came out of KCDC, it is really, really clear that there needs to be some really strong, hard looks taken at our community, right down to the liquor licensing. Our liquor licensing issues have been likened to Courtney Place, and that's not good enough in a town like ours. It's a historical town. It's the second oldest town in New Zealand. It's only one of 3 bilingual towns in New Zealand, and yet we're faced with these sorts of other things and these other pressures that are coming on board, and often just have to do what we can do with very little. So, there is an advantage. The last part about access, James, and I'm sorry, I have digressed, excuse my passion, but the other thing is cost. If you look at the cost to access those facilities after school hours, most of our groups in Otaki have got as much chance as flying to access those facilities, and particularly on a regular basis. They just couldn't. So all that's happening is the sector of our community, the Kāpiti Coast community, that is best placed to access these financially, access them, and the groups that can't continue to be disadvantaged.
Thank you. I had a second question, but just your response made me think of another one. So in my experience in terms of the Youth Council, and I guess the challenge in the Youth Council getting participation from Otaki, given that some of that came out of Otaki College, what has been the barrier from those youth participating from an Otaki level in the Kāpiti Youth Council? Is it, go back to the same comment you made earlier, we take away the buildings, we don't talk about facilities, it actually becomes more of a challenge for them just actually participating in things outside of the
Well, it does, and yet we have a group which is supported by council called Anamata, and we have 15, 20 young people going there on a regular basis, talking about big issues, talking about climate change, talking about cultural issues, talking about racism, talking about those things that matter to young people. So it's not that our young people are disinterested in coming to the Youth Council. What they're not interested in is some of the rhetoric that goes on in there when their issues tend to be slightly different, and also quite often culturally bound. And they feel safer in their own environment to be able to discuss those things.
And so that group was set up in response to the challenge of getting Otaki participation in Youth Council. Yes. The third question that I've got for you, this isn't about Otaki College, is it? It's about having a discussion around what's appropriate and where that's appropriate. Maybe if you could clarify that. Well,
I've got Kiri Mikana here, Whakatupuranga Ruamano, Rouru, Otaki Primary, all our secondary and primary schools are really concerned about the fact that this is not just about a sports facility. This is about, do we really need this when we've got other facilities? Do we really need to spend money in that direction when there's all these social issues going on? And wouldn't that money be better spent actually and better served going into communities where you could actually be funding and making a difference for young people? Because at the end of the day, our rangatahi today are our rangatira tomorrow. And if you continue to have broken young people coming through, that's just going to be a bigger burden on our communities going forward. So we're all about this is not a Paraparaumu College thing, it's not a Kāpiti College thing, it's actually about let's look at what we have in this community and let's utilise that so that the money that we have for the spend to keep CapEx down and rates down, we can still actually channel into where it's really needed. And that's all we're asking, that our young people actually finally get looked after, that the residents in our town that are now having to sleep in cars or leave our district and become disconnected from whānau are looked after. We are just saying Otaki needs a voice. We know what you try and do, James. We know that Chris is here. We're not saying that the voice isn't here, but collectively, this is a council voice. And the council needs to look at, overall, what is happening north. This is not the Paraparaumu District Council. This is a Kāpiti Coast District Council. Otaki is part of that. And we want to have the issues and the needs that we have addressed because they are important issues.
Kia ora, Andy.
Councillor Holbrook.
Thank you for your submission today. It's certainly a huge question you've put in front of us today. I would challenge the fact that Otaki is being completely overlooked in this long-term plan, though. We've got nearly $10 million going into Otaki facilities and $3.4 million going into the pool upgrade. I'm just going to go back to the community facilities. Do you think there's a chance to engage more closely with the local community, and in particular rangatahi, around how that looks and what they need from those facilities and that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely, and I appreciate, the investment in buildings that is outlined in the LTP, greatly received. But buildings are buildings, and the people make communities. And those buildings are of no use at all unless we have the services and the people to actually be inside those buildings to make the difference.
Yeah.
So what we're saying here is, do you want to spend, $501 million on a cover on a sports facility, or do you want to put $1 million into helping support the wages and building the capacity of local organisations that know our community that will engage our rangatahi? And that's what we're saying. We're not saying don't build sports facilities. What we're asking is that there is a real consideration given to whether that is needed or not, and actually what's really needed when you start going back to the stats that you have at your fingertips around our social degradation and the issues that we face.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask more specifically, another question if I might through you, Mr Chair. You mentioned that the rest of the district doesn't need another indoor sports facility because there's no purapura in Otaki. Yes. Are there any barriers to local people using that facility? Is it overbooked? Is it expensive? I'm asking how accessible is that facility for our kind of under 18s?
That facility is accessible to anyone in our community as long as you book and you pay. And I mean, every facility has payment, and it would be no different than people having to come and use an all-weather facility down here. They would have to book, they would have to pay. But there just seems to be this discourse that it's okay for Otaki to travel to Paraparaumu, but residents here do not want to travel up to Otaki to access what is an international facility. It's mind-boggling. That facility is there. It's not going to be charging anything more than Raukura is charging for their facilities. It just means that people actually have to change their mindset.
Yeah, so it was mentioned yesterday, I think it was Tony Kane who actually said it, it's only 15, 20 minutes up the road, but there's this sense that there's this gulf, and that's because of our transport connections, but also it's a mindset thing too. So thank you for bringing this discussion today. It's really important in terms of your wider community, but also in terms of our wider district. Thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Councillor Buswell.
Thanks, Andy, and the other gentleman behind you for coming in and just highlighting what's a pretty heartfelt, compassionate view on what's happening in Otaki. So I really like to applaud you for that. My question is, I don't know, you could take it whichever way you want, but do you think that the Otaki community feels more connected to the northern areas and like Horowhenua? Is it easier for them to connect with the Horowhenua services and things than it is the rest of the Kāpiti coast?
Absolutely not. Our connection lies south. We are really, really adamant that our connection lies here. We're pushing all our sports teams here. All our teams play in the southern, so there's a sporting connection. There's the connection as part of this, as part of Kāpiti Coast District Council. There's actually no transport for us north. There's a complete disconnect. It's hard enough coming south, but there's a total disconnect north. I talked about traditional boundaries. When Otaki was brought down here, and Guru knows that this is a bandwagon, no one ever thought to change the policing boundaries. No one ever thought to change the health boundaries. No one ever thought to do those things. So our young people are expected to go to Palmerston North and Levin to access health services that they can't even get to. And if they miss an appointment, they're taken off the books. this plea today really is to not only look at Ōtaki in terms of its needs, but look at it longer term in terms of the bigger picture, and that is actually put your arms out, wrap around, and actually bring Ōtaki into the fold, and not just leave us sitting up there wafting around, just hoping that we might get a dollop here and a dollop there for every second LTP. That shouldn't be how it is, and I know that it's not easy. And I appreciate Guru's time that he's been looking at boundary stuff, but it's certainly our connection is here, and just on a cultural perspective, I guess we all know that there is the Art Confederation, and we know that Raukawa and Te Atiawa and Toa are connected, and that's a southern connection. So culturally we're connected as well, and those ties go back hundreds of years. So we're not talking about anything new here.
Hi, sorry, another question. Look, we had a Ōtaki health advocate here yesterday, and he spoke about a submission for expressing the need really well for essential Ōtaki medical health social services hub.
Yes.
Somewhere in Ōtaki, and I said to him, you've done so well in expressing the need you have, but I'm really, really interested in the dream you have. What's your concept? How does this thing do you propose will look and feel? So we're deliberating on this LTP till the 24th of June, and I'm wondering if you guys could get back to us with an idea of what's your dream for this an all-weather hub. Can you just write some notes, a sports facility?
We wouldn't actually have a dream for an all-weather sports facility.
Yeah,
so I think our desire would be that money spent to develop the Ōtaki township is utilised to develop a hub that would service so that you do have health providers, you do have counsellors, that you do have MSD, that you do have connectivity with council. So, I mean, even for some of our people getting down to this facility here to actually get question answered, as well as the development of a library, what we're after is a really good concept where young people can go, where people in need can go, where our community can focus.
Yeah.
But to make that work, you need good people inside that, and you need to have the capacity for those things to operate. And so really it's saying to you as councillors, do you want to fund an all-weather hub for sport, or do you want to address the many social issues that are up in our community and use money that you're putting there to go to there, knowing that you've always got Otarawa Park sitting there scheduled for development anyway?
Yep, good point. Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies for coming in late, but I had read your submission with great interest. So I'm just interested to hear the conversations around the Ngā facility there, and to me that is an amazing facility, and I suppose I'm just interested in your comments around why youth need to come south as opposed to using that facility. I understand, I see them there at the netball courts every Saturday, but in terms of using that facility rather than needing to come south. What
are you talking about down at our netball competition?
No, I'm talking about that facility, that that indoor court facility.
Yep.
At present. Why aren't they able to use that? And
they are.
And why do they need to come down here then?
Our kids play in all their sports competitions down here. So we're saying we don't need an all-weather facility down here. You've got one up there.
Yeah. So I've I have to admit I've been there to basketball tournaments, and I think it's my understanding it's the envy of a lot of people down here. And so to actually have something similar up there is an overkill. And I suppose in terms of looking at the youth down here, if they want to use an indoor facility at this point in time, there's nothing, and they've got the same issues about being able to get from here up to Ōtaki. And so...
well, I beg to differ. Financially, most people here are far better off than our community. That's the first thing. Secondly, you've got two massive community gyms that you've funded. You've got KC gym down there. You've got Paraparaumu, which is a community gym. Those gyms you've funded as sports facilities for this community. What have you done in Otaki?
So if you are a 16-year-old
Yeah.
and don't play part of a team,
Yeah.
I don't know whether you have access to either of those gyms here, and you can't necessarily drive up to Otaki.
Well, yeah, but
Just.
I think what you're saying is you're
hang
actually...
on. I don't want this to turn into a debate. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my answer is simple, and this is what really bugs us in Otaki. You're sitting here in Paraparaumu wanting another facility, yet another facility, more facilities than anything up in Otaki, because your 16-year-old can't travel there, but you're quite happy to invest down here in that facility and expect our kids to, from a community that is far worse off than this community. I'm sorry, Councillor, I find that a little bit distasteful.
So I have to say, I'm not talking about, I do not have a 16-year-old.
That was your example.
Yes, that's
I think
exactly right.
you've exhausted that.
Yes, thank you.
Can I jump in with something at all? I feel that the point is a little bit being missed by a lot of people. It's the fact is that what we're getting to is that there's a hugely significant amount of money that's going to be invested down here when we already have a lot of these facilities, as well as a future plan to develop these facilities in Otarawa, that area. So the point is it's not about saying that we want the money for our facilities or we want this. It's not about that. We've got those facilities in our community already, Ngā Purapura being one of them. So why are we investing a huge amount of money in this when A, those facilities already exist, and B, we have what we are considering much greater needs, particularly within Otaki. That's the gist of it, as far as I...
Absolutely.
So can I just say the elephant in the room in this is the public transport connection between these two communities, and that is an ongoing discussion with regional council and the government. So, and that's something we are not sitting back on. We are doing this quite actively.
Could I also say, Guru, that despite any public transport being improved, if it is improved, all I would stress is that our families struggle. If you look at the statistics, we have the highest number of low-income earners in the whole of the Kāpiti coast. Every school in Otaki has been eligible for school lunches. What is the criteria for school lunches? To be in the bottom 25% of communities in New Zealand. So please, when you are considering facilities, consider that sometimes the communities that are better off might be better to do the travelling than those that are not. And that's equity, and that's the type of equity lens that we're asking for.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we do have a Greater Wellington submission this afternoon, and I'm sure that Councillor Compton, as our representative, will highlight some of these issues in terms of connectivity, because I think despite the fact that it is a struggle, I mean, at least the possibility is there to get from facility to facility if we have those connections. And I remember we made that point quite strongly when we argued for upgrades to Otaki Pool, when we had some pushback from some people saying, but we have it here in Paraparaumu. Our argument was that we needed people to be able to walk to learn to swim. Yes. So, you know, we're very well aware of those facts, and thanks for the clarification around the point that's being made today. I think it's really important to be cognizant of the fact that it's not one indoor facility versus another one. It's
Absolutely
much bigger than that.
Yep.
Councillor McCann.
Look, I know that I've already started with a question, but just listening to the discussion, Andy, I think it might be helpful, I guess, to help councillors understand the level of deprivation in Otaki, what you deal with as a principal. I'm not sure all schools have issues of hardship within their communities, but the level that you experience within Otaki College and what it means to the families, the impact.
Oh, you know, I mean, I'm not going to try and lay out some terrible case just to make a point, but on a daily basis, we have young people that can't come to college and that because they can't afford uniforms. So we're running around trying to buy uniforms. School lunches have been an absolute amazing boost for us, just seeing young people actually being fed, because often we will have kids arriving at school after just asking for a kai. We have students that struggle to actually take courses and will quietly withdraw from courses that might actually leave them feeling whakamara about having to front up for some money for particular gear or whatever. So, I mean, the statistics really speak for themselves. You know, when you've got that many people out of work, low income bracket, one family, with a mum or a dad, or actually living, a number of our kids living with an auntie or an uncle or a nanny or a koro, times are tough. Times are very tough. We've had families sleeping in cars. It's not been easy. And those kids in that front up to school on a regular basis, because school is the one common thing that they have in their life. And they've got their peers and they've got their supports. The mental health issues, we have had to significantly fund extra counselling through our ex-Otaki alumni, paying for extra counsellors to come in to support our young people with those mental health issues, because we can't get the support that we've needed through DHB. So, you know, we've got big hearts in Otaki, and our ex-Otaki alumni have done amazing stuff for our young people. And it hasn't just been about buildings, it's been about those people to support them, to wrap around them, to come in, to look after them, to mentor them. And you can't put a dollar figure on that. And Rodu and Kiri Mihana and any other principal in Otaki will be able to give you some pretty heartfelt stories about some of the young people and what they have to do or don't do. COVID was a classic example of huge numbers of our young people struggling to return to school because they were the only breadwinner in their family. And so school became a non-entity, but while they had to actually fund and feed their whānau because they were the go-to person. So yeah, it's not easy out there. But the one thing that we do have is a big, strong heart, and our young people are amazing. And despite what gets chucked at them, 9 times out of 10 they rise above it. So that's why we're passionate about our young people, and just want to see them get a fair, slice of the cake, really.
Councillor Holiday.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Andy. Mine's not a question, it's more comments, I'm afraid, but I just want to thank you for coming in and giving us such a strong submission with regards to your championing of Otaki. It's much appreciated from my end, most definitely, living up that way a bit more now. I'd like to think with the changes that are coming with the CCDHB and the Bid Central as well, that'll certainly help that boundary issue, because I know we've all struggled trying to figure out how to get around that one. And I'm hoping that we get a clean sweep on that, but we need to tie the police and the other agencies into that as well. I'm also thankful that we've got the expressway now, and I think the main problem we do have is just a mindset.
Yes.
With regards to that, and so you coming in and having the conversation helps us break that down for another way, and makes us all aware, because I think you've got a very responsive council here with regards to the plights that you mentioned. So I just wanted to thank you very much for coming in today.
Cool.
Councillor McCann, we've caught up with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much for delivering this impassioned plea. I want to make a comment and then try and work towards the solution. One comment that is not aware to the public is that we're working on our regional planning where we're putting houses, and one of the pieces of work that we're doing at this stage does try to help ensure that we get transport into Otaki. Because I think this council realises that once we get transport, then we start to get a real argument or a stronger argument for the services that are so often lacking. So I just want to make that point before we move on to the equity and equality questions you raise. The question that I have is that how do we move forward? Because your request is effectively to not spend money here, but that's not, as being a newbie, that's not how the LTP responds. So how do we move forward with a request for resources to go to Otaki rather than a request not to spend here?
Thank you, Councillor. I guess one of those things is that we get caught up in our own day-to-day life, and things like LTPs and that fall off the radar when you're trying to look after schools and young people and all those other things. So maybe we were a little bit slow off the uptake and should have actually been in more support of submissions around health and around community wellbeing. I don't know what your process is, apart from the fact that people can request things in the LTP, and pretty much my understanding, albeit pretty naive, might be that you can either let those things through or decline them. And I guess all we would be asking for is, if you have the power to decline, but have funds there that leaves a residual under your CapEx budget, that you could then maybe look at rechanneling those further down the track into some of the services and the support that we need in our community. I'm sorry, I haven't got perhaps answered the question in the way that you'd like. But again, that's because I'm not fully cognizant of the workings of council and how that all runs.
The process here, of course, is that we can't ask staff questions because we're here to hear your concerns, suggestions, and then ask questions of that. So we'll take that offline, but I'm sure that you and the community are willing to have some of these conversations as quickly as possible, noting that you are in effect, through your wording, requesting additional funding into Otaki. That's the way that I do read it.
If you need to continue with an all-weather facility and then look at Otaki, yes, that is additional. If you don't need to look at an all-weather facility as per the request in the LTP, then we'd be requesting that the funds that might then come online would be diverted, so as to avoid. No one's actually wanting anyone to be paying extra rates if they can't, but I mean, the reality is that we all know that that's a naivety in itself.
Thank you for that clarification. That helps.
Right. No other questions? Thank you very much for coming here and fronting your submission. And we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. Much appreciated. Kia ora koutou.
Thanks. Wellington Fish and Game not here.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. So Phil has been caught up in traffic, and I was wondering if I could propose that you go to lunch early and come back at 1:15 so we can fit Phil in. That'd be great, thank you. So then his halfway journey isn't wasted. I've asked them to bring it as soon as they can, so hopefully it's not. Is it?